So I'm going to get started. I'm the host today. My name is Danna Ormstrup. I'm the executive director of the Foothills Fetal Alcohol Society. So I'm sitting in my home in southern Alberta, kind of between Calgary and Lethbridge, if you know Alberta. I live on a quarter section and I'm looking at the mountains this morning. And we know that usually the first week of June, the mountain that I look at is called Holy Cross Mountain. And there's about 4 days where the snow melts the mountain, the snow melts on the mountain, and it starts as kind of a hook and a J, and then eventually the hook comes off and all that's left is a cross, and we only see it for about 4 days, but it's a pretty amazing sight. So that's a little peek at where I am. Nicole's joining us from Prince George, Alberta. And Janice, where are you from?
I'm the city of Kawartha Lakes in Ontario, so Lindsay, Ontario.
Lindsay, Ontario. And what do you see out your window this morning?
Construction.
Construction. There you go. A world at work. Nicole, what do you see when you look out your window?
Oh, well, I'm joining you from Prince George in British Columbia, which is on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lake Litani. And we yesterday had 28 degrees, which was like this super warm, hot summer day. And then last night it was 4 degrees and it was chilly. But this morning the bird song was amazing. And there's all the thrushes have come back into the neighborhood. So it's nice to see them in the trees.
Well, we really are going sort of side to side, east to west this morning, so a little peek at where you all learning. So I'm going to start the formal part of our presentation and know that for today, the goal for Nicole and Janice and I is that we have a conversation about this idea of understanding the past to shape the future, and that we all know we have a different definition of what transitional planning means, and we have a different idea about how that should look. And I just really hope by the end of today that we all get to know each other a little bit more and feel free to share ideas about this cool thing in classrooms. I'm going to do a quick land acknowledgement. An important step in reconciliation is the acknowledgement of traditional treaty lands and recognition for people of the territory. The CanFASD Research Network recognizes the historical significance and contribution of Indigenous peoples and their cultures and understands the important role that the Indigenous community plays today and in the future. We acknowledge that we live, work, and meet on traditional territories across Canada of many of the First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose first footsteps have marked the land for centuries. So welcome to your own land acknowledgement. This is part 2 of a webinar for educators. If you joined us a few months ago, the first one was on, I don't actually remember when the day was, but there was 3 of us having conversation then about kind of the top 10 things that we thought the teachers might know, teachers and parents, when it comes to talking about education. Today's presenters, you'll see their beautiful faces. That's Janice and Nicole. Janice is a system leader in Ontario, and she's got down here that she's got 2 decades of experience working with kids, youth, and families, and started as an early childhood educator. She has a passion for neurodivergent kids, all the way from learning disabilities and education, and has a post-secondary graduate certificate in FASD. Janice is chair of something called FASD 1. Do you say FAST 1, Janice?
Some people say FASD 1. I say FASD 1. The full name is FASD Ontario Network of Expertise. I didn't come up with it. It's a long, but it really covers what we do well.
Excellent. And Janice has a role in all kinds of things there and a voice in policy discussion, prevention, education, and diagnosis. So I think I want to tell you that the minute I met Janice, you can feel her passion. So with both of these ladies, what's going to shine through for you is not only a whole bucket of expertise, but a lovely passion for the field that we're in. Nicole is a SLP, speech language pathologist, with a really amazing little group called, not so little, group called PopFast in BC. She has this student-centered approach, and again, you will hear this when you come out about that really important piece of individualized planning. She believes that collaboration between educators, support staff, and families is a rich framework for making informed, conscious, and compassionate decisions about how to support learners. Nicole completed her training at University of Alberta, holds a master's degree. And I know from our clinic, we have a little clinic, I always find the insights of an SLP especially interesting. You have a wide breadth of information to bring to the team. So having said that, we're going to start with Janice, and Janice is the one that picked this amazing title, Understanding the Past to Shape the Future. We knew that transitional planning was kind of formal, and Janice threw that out there, and we jumped on it and said, let's call it that. So Janice, you're on.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction, Dana, as well. I am passionate about FASD, and I do feel very strongly about how our past experiences shape our future, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, welcome to Understanding the Past to Shape the Future, Transitional Planning for Students with FASD. And we have to get the slides to change. That's the next step. The purpose of this presentation is to recognize the signs of FASD in the classroom, build strong trust-based relationships with students and their caregivers, and implement effective planning to help students thrive as they move through and into a new school year. We're going to do that a little bit I'm going to cover the following topics: why transitions matter, what makes transitioning challenging, some key principles, some planning, and why a team approach is so important. And then Nicole is going to provide some more strategies and tools in her section. So throughout the presentation, when I say FASD, I'm including suspected FASD as well. And please feel free to put those questions, comments, or insights into the Q&A or comment section as we move along. So the broad definition of complex needs is children who experience multiple or co-occurring diagnoses or behavioral problems that cross multiple service sectors. So complex needs make transitions to a new grade or school particularly challenging because they often impact how the student processes change, adapts to new environments, manages their emotions, socials, and cognitive demands. So when we think of complex kids, we might not always have the same profile of a child in mind. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what makes FASD complex. I think we all know in our heads it's complex, but what does it really mean for us to have it be complex? So FASD is a whole body disorder and a lifelong disability. Individuals with FASD will experience some degree of challenges in their daily living and need support with motor skills, physical health, learning, memory, attention, communication, emotional regulation, social skills to reach their full potential. So the co-occurring conditions that also come along with FASD a lot of the time make it even more complicated. So we might see autism, anxiety, ADHD, mood disorders, learning disabilities. And the overlapping piece of this can make it even more complicated to plan for these students. I often refer to my FASD students' diagnoses as having alphabet soup. They can have so many that it can make it very difficult to pull it apart and understand which one is in the driving seat at that moment. Most individuals with FASD do not have the physical traits. Less than 10% will have the facial features. So it really means that FASD is an invisible disability. And the next sentence I'm going to say, I have been asked this numerous times in my working with the schools, is what about the intellectual ability? So the IQ scores for individuals living with FASD vary greatly. They go from very low to very high, with the majority of the diagnoses falling in the low average to average range. And that can often mask the amount of support that they need. They appear to be functioning well, and we have great expectations for them, and then we really wonder what happened when things go off the rails. And usually it's because our expectations were higher than they could meet. So in short, FASD is complex because it's lifelong, invisible, widely variable, and often misunderstood. And supporting individuals with FASD requires a deep understanding, a lot of patience, and a lot of collaborative planning. So what is the transitional challenge? And please feel free to add some additional ones if I've missed them on this, on what makes transitioning challenging. So the top one that I hear about is incomplete or inconsistent information. You might not receive the full student profile, including learning history, triggers, strengths, and successful strategies. Limited time. We think we have lots of time. I know that from just planning for this presentation today. I thought I had a lot more time than I did. And time goes by really quickly. And I don't know if that's just because as I get older, I blink and a month has gone by. But we often feel like we have a lot of time, but then we end up being rushed. And important information gets lost between when we're rushed or between terms of summer breaks. And then we need to ensure that families are included in the planning, which is a real challenge because our families are busy and they have a lot on the go themselves. But that is really important to ensure that we always include the families and trying to always remember that nothing for us without us catchphrase that we see a lot of. So difficulty scheduling time comes in, especially for collaborative transitional meetings, classroom visits, and one-to-one planning with the previous teacher. And many educators report feeling that they're unprepared to support students with complex neurodevelopmental, behavioral, and emotional needs. So that lack of specialized training comes in. And where do you get that training? And when do you get the time out of the classroom to obtain that training? And how can we prioritize that? FASD is often misunderstood or confused with behavioral issues leading to mismatched supports. So a reminder that FASD is a brain-based disability and that it affects behavior. It isn't behavior, but it affects our behavior. So it's all of that piece. The other one that I hear about most often when it comes to the school transitions is the inadequate support structures. So there's limited access to our educational therapists, educational assistants, our therapists, our special education teachers, our counselors, and we're being expected to differentiate a curriculum without sufficient resources or team support. And it's not just the curriculum that we are looking at. We have to look at the environment, the communication strategies, and the behavior strategies that we need to all put in place. So if we don't have the adequate support structures in place, it can be really difficult to make sure that we meet all of those needs. And the biggest one that are usually out of our control and we not always have anything that we can do about, but we have to work with, is the systemic barriers. Funding, difficulty getting assessments completed, the complicated process to access needed supports, staffing changes to programs, inconsistent communication systems. And I'm sure there are more, but those were the ones that I see most often. But please feel free to let us know of any that we've missed along that. So you can't talk about FASD without at least spending a couple minutes talking about the stigma that surrounds it. And who has heard this statement before? FASD is 100% preventable. And I get two reactions from the professionals. I usually get that little smile that Nicole's giving me right now, and that piece. But for some people that are new to FASD and the world of FASD, I often get that, yeah, it is 100% preventable. So let's unpack that a little bit and what that would look like. In order to eliminate FASD, we would need to address the root causes. So we need to look at trauma, substance use disorders, poverty, gender inequality, and the culture of alcohol use. And then we would have to make sure that the supports are in place to deal with all of those issues. We would have to focus on family planning. 40% of pregnancies in Canada are still unplanned. So we would really have to focus on family planning and birth control and making sure that that's available to everyone. And we would have to embrace a community's role in FASD as well. So what about the responsibility of partners, families, community support agencies, education, and all of those pieces? And how do we wrap them in to help us deal with eliminating FASD as well? Education about alcohol would need to start at a fairly young age. We would have to start those education programs maybe in grades 6, 7, and 8. Kids are starting to drink younger and experiment with alcohol at a younger age every year. So for FASD to be 100% preventable, we would need to have a deep cultural shift. And it would have to take all of us working together from all across all sectors to make that difference. So yes, it might be 100% preventable, but I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. So we really need to look at how do we think about our own alcohol use? What are our views of alcohol and substance use? And help us try to understand how our own views and beliefs affect how we react, speak, and judge and support others. So I'm going to give you an example. If you believe that alcohol use during pregnancy is solely a matter of personal choice, you may judge that parent of a student with FASD before even knowing their story. And that's going to impact the way that you interact with the student, with the way you consider the transition times, how you engage with that family. Stigma can undermine collaboration, preparedness, and supportive attitudes. It can delay diagnosis. It prevents families from being able to engage because they're worried about whether they're going to be judged. It can lower expectations from the student, which can impact the student's growth and success. And it can limit the resources that are offered to families, resulting in frustration and isolation for the families we work in. So you heard Danna comment about the comment that I made when we were planning this. And I do truly believe that past experiences predict future behaviors. So I want to just talk a little bit about what that looks like when we're talking about transitions. So our past experience can impact our shaped expectations. Students with FASD often interpret future situations based on past experiences, whether it was positive or negative. So if a past transitions were confusing or traumatic, they may approach new ones with fear or resistance. It's common for them to base one experience and not be able to expand that to this happened last time, but it could be different this time. That's difficult for a lot of the students that we work with. Trauma responses. Repeated negative experiences can lead to fight, flight, or freeze behaviors, and in response to what seems like a normal or very routine transition. So we need to keep that being well aware that their past traumas can come forward. Learning coping strategies. So students may develop maladaptive behaviors, such as avoidance or aggression, if those behaviors previously helped them feel safe or gain control. So a few years ago, I worked with a student who was in grade 9, and he learned very early on in grade 9 that if he threatened the teacher, he would get sent home for the day. So that became a routine thing for him. So anytime that he felt threatened, and it could have been anything that threatened him, that he didn't feel safe, or if he just did not want to be at school that day, if he was having trouble with social things in the classroom and dealing with the work, he would threaten the teacher. And he had a whole routine. He would even come to class some days with his backpack ready to go. That it was like he had planned it ahead of time. It was like, okay, I didn't make it through lunch today. I had an argument with one of my friends at lunch. I don't want to be here anymore. He'd walk into math class. He'd walk up to the teacher. He'd swear at him. He'd, tell him that he was going to kick his car door, or he would knock over a chair. And the automatic administration response would be send him home. So we had learned that response. And when we went in and we addressed that to say, okay, when he's having a bad day, then, is there a trusting person at the school that he can meet with to talk about that? Is there a safe room that we can go? Is there a place else where he can sit without being sent home? The behavior stopped by the midway through the second semester, once we were able to figure it out. But that was definitely a learned coping strategy on his part. Somewhat of an inventive one as well. So the trust and relationship impact. So positive past relationships can increase our cooperation and resilience, but negative ones can result in skepticism and withdrawal from adults and peers. They can really need to have a trusting person that they can always go to. And it needs to be one or two people that are consistently there. It can't be someone that's coming in and out. They really need to have that trust relationship. Emotional memory overrules logic. This is a huge one for the kids that I've worked with. So the brain prioritizes past emotional responses, especially for students with neurodevelopmental differences. If a situation feels like a previous negative one, the response might be immediate and intense, even if it's a totally different context. And I've seen this numerous times. One of the students that I've worked with has sensory issues, and for her, it was smell. It was black coffee was the smell that bothered her. And if she walked into a classroom where she could smell black coffee, it would take her back to a previous memory of a bad interaction with someone who was drinking black coffee, and it automatically put her on edge. And she was just hyper ready for something to go wrong at that very moment. So it's really interesting how our past experiences can help predict the future behaviors. And when we're transitioning and planning, this is part of the reason why it's really so important to have that collaborative approach and to work with a team and to have that piece. I understand the appeal of getting to know the student on your own, but when we're working with complex students, having that past knowledge helps you learn who that student is, the real student, not the perceptions of someone else, when you understand what their past is bringing, what they're bringing forward in their past. So what are some key successful principles for transitioning? So I've picked 5. There are probably more, but these are the ones that I find that really are great for guidelines to keep us on track. So predictability. Predictability reduces anxiety and fosters a sense of control. If the student doesn't know what to expect, they will fill in that information for themselves based on their past experience and what other people have told them, videos that they've watched, reels that they've seen, YouTubes, and they'll make that piece. So they can create an amazing image of what going into grade 3 is going to look like. And then the teacher's going to be amazing. Everybody's going to be my friend. I'm going to be able to do the work. It's all going to be great. And that's the picture that they've gotten in their mind. But when that doesn't come to truth, when that doesn't live up to their expectations, they can react to that negatively and that piece. So providing them that predictability, sharing with them what's going to happen, giving them the information is really important. So they have information to base it on, and they're not just filling in the blanks by themselves. Preparation. Preparing for new environments can cause cognitive overload and emotional stress. So when we don't prepare the student, they can arrive to school already stressed, and then they can think of the simplest obstacle can cause a meltdown. When we're thinking about preparing, we really need to think outside of the box. I have facilitated a transitioning to middle and high school program for a few years. We used to run it at the high school that the kids were going to be transitioning into. So it gave them 4 days in the summer when there was no other students at the school to experience the school. And it was a great way to present them. And one of the things that we always did was on our breaks, we would go for a walk around the school. This met 2 needs. 1, gave us a movement break, and 2, it gave them the chance to get familiar with the school. I always, you haven't learned this about me yet, or you will learn, I talk a lot. I don't like awkward silences. I like to fill them. So when we'd be walking around the school, I'd be asking them questions. What do you think this hall is for? What do you think this is, that is? But one thing that did was it brought them out to feel comfortable enough to ask us questions. And these were some of the questions that we've had, and why you really have to think outside the box and really over prepare. You can't be too prepared for a transition. One of the questions was, if I come in this door and the kid that bullies me is in the hallway, can I leave? Can I go back out? One of the other ones was, what if there's a grade 12 in the bathroom? Can I go to that bathroom? Should I find a different bathroom? Is the bathroom safe? And one of the ones that I hadn't really thought of on how to deal with and how to prepare for this question was, what do I do if my classroom smells bad? And how do I cope with that? She was very sensitive to smells, and this was her biggest concern, was how was she going to deal with the smells at school. So I really led with us talking to her family to come up with coping strategies and making sure that we shared that with the teachers so that the garbages could be emptied more frequently in that classroom, and different places put in. Collaboration, 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 collaboration. I don't think Nicole and I will say it enough today. It's one of the biggest things that has to happen. And successful transitions rely on the shared knowledge and coordination. Sports between the educators, the specialists, and the families. Always keep the families involved. They know the students best, and they will be able to provide you those little glimmers of pieces that you'll need to know. So holding transition meetings that include current and the receiving teachers, support staff, and parents, share effective strategies, accommodation, and the insights to the students' current educational needs, and ensure that everyone involved understands the student's strengths and needs. Really focus on what they are good at and how we can move that forward for them. We'll move on to, now I do recognize with collaboration, that's where those system barriers come in, right? And we have to acknowledge that as well. So student voice and family engagement. I would say that this is probably one of the hardest things to do well, and it takes practice and time and a real concerted effort to make sure that we really intentionally include the families and engage them. It can be done very, very well, and parents want it, even though it will seem like there are barriers. We have to remember these families are busy. They have their own challenges to deal with at home as well. But it is very important that we always think about that nothing for us without us model that we hear about all the time. And then the consistency across settings. So inconsistent expectations, strategies, and communication styles can confuse the families and the students and increase behavior challenges. Use consistent behavior supports as much as possible, accommodations, communications, across all settings. And align the language. Language is huge for communicating with our students and our families, and we need to remember how they process the information, whether we need to slow it down or whether we need to present it in different ways, but really trying to have that communication style that's going to meet the family needs as well. It's so easy to fall into education speak when we work in the fields for so long, or we're dealing with schools all the time. We throw off acronyms like IEPs and IPRCs and all of this all the time, and we need to make sure that everybody understands it. The other piece that's really important with the consistency across settings is training. Making sure the staff all have the same training, so they all know how to deal with the incidences the same way. That consistency will make it so much easier. The child will learn quite quickly that this is the transition, and if I do this, this is what's going to happen no matter where I am. So that's really another strong piece to making the transition successful. Planning early and intentionally. So we plan for daily transitions all the time. We really look at moving from class to class, coming in from breaks, back from gym class. And when we do this planning, we really do it with intentionality. We are really focused on this incident happened when we were coming in from recess. So we need to plan on how we're going to get that. He's going to come in before the kids. He's going to come in after the kids, to reduce those pieces and make our days go smoother. But when we're doing these big transition plannings, sometimes we lose that intentionality focused, and it becomes a checklist focus. I have to connect with the teacher. I have to make sure that I've done this with the administration. I have to make sure that his OSR is up to date, or sorry, That's an Ontario reference. His student record is up to par with everything else. And we really forget about the intentionality of what is the purpose of moving him from grade 7 to grade 8. What is our goal with that transition? And bring back that intentionality to the larger transitions as well. Planning early and intentionally for trans, it reduces the anxiety and uncertainty. It helps create a predictable and stable process. It reduces emotional stress, not just for the family and the child, but for us as well. It builds continuity and supports. It's really time consuming to have to reach out for supports every year. If you know that that student has had SLP or OT in grade 3, then make sure that's on the list for grade 4. It's easier to say, you know what, he's doing really well. We can cancel that support right now, but let's keep it in the back pocket. But if you cancel it before in between, then you have to go through that whole process again. It really delays getting things in place in the new year. And allowing time for that collaboration. It gives everyone time to contribute, share, and align with the goals that we have for our students. Empowers students and families, students and caregivers feel heard, and they're involved, and their involvement through trust and engagement will increase. And it prevents crisis and reactive responses. And it increases our teacher readiness as well. With early planning, educators can be trained ahead of time and be prepared to provide those daily supports that are needed. Just really will make things early easier. Again, that time, I understand that the barriers that the system throws up and the lack of time and resources that we have can make it all more complicated. But in the end, it really will be worth it. So the collaborative team approach, I'm going to backstep a little bit for this one and talk about how FASD is diagnosed. So there's no specific medical test to diagnose FASD. The assessment process involves meeting with a diagnostic team. It's made up of several different professionals, including pediatricians, psychologists, speech and language pathologists, social worker, occupational therapist, and usually a clinical coordinator as well. So it'd be really unrealistic an unrealistic expectation if we expected that only 1 or 2 people can do a transition through school meetings. We really need to have that multidisciplinary approach when we're transitioning FASD students because it affects so many different domains and across so many different environments. It really would be challenging if we didn't have that collaborative team approach. So it's one of the things that I think that we really want to be as takeaway. So let's talk about those takeaways and then we'll open it up for questions. So what are the key takeaways from the part that I'm presenting? Transitions are not events. They're processes. They take time. They last over the whole school year in different ways, whether it's a macro or a micro transition. The earlier and more intentional the plan, the better it is, and the easier it will be to start the next year. Collaboration is key. No one can do this alone. Student and family voice must always be at the center and be included. And then predictability, preparation, and consistency can protect the student's well-being and make the student feel secure in that transition. That's my part. So I'd like to hear from everybody else on how they're feeling about transitions and what are maybe some of the barriers that you have so that Nicole might be able to address them in hers.
I really like the way that I work in schools and probably transition is the thing that comes up the most after confabulation and stealing and dysregulation. Transition will happen with some of those things. So I love the way that you gave us some really matter-of-fact, common, easy to do. Didn't make it a big deal. We don't have to make a big deal about this because transition is so much, right? So many things happen in schools. So I wanted to talk, thank you, about mentioning brain domains because those 10 brain domains, so again, if you're new to FASD, I'm just going to go through them so quickly because Janice touched on them. They are, and if you think about the way that these brain domains, the way that your brain works in these domains to handle your life, including you making a small transition, recess to the classroom, bathroom to the classroom, classroom to the gym, gym to the to have a guest speaker in there, an assembly instead of gym class. So many, right? So many. So the 10 brain domains are attention. Adaptive functioning has 3 parts. Practical, do you know your address? Social, do you know what to do to make friends? And conceptual, the big parts of life that we sort of have to figure out. Academics, cognition. So cognition is a little bit different than academics. Cognition is the way we think, not necessarily the way we learn. And there's a little bit of a difference there. So the way you think, is everything really concrete for you? Can you get bigger picture kinds of things? So where does that play a role in a student that has to make some transitions? Memory, big one. Executive functioning, big one. Neurophysiology. Language is the class. We need to come to your desk now. Does that mean and sit down? Does that mean just come to the desk and go back again? You know, watch what our language is saying. Affect regulation is mood and motor. So is it really hard for that child to get up off the carpet when we're doing our morning, you know, the seasons are changing, what day is it, in our little dance? Are you sitting for that? Is it hard to get up and move to the next place? Are we allowing for that kind of motor? So, and then always, Janice, you mentioned sensory, always consider the sensory stuff. I thought it was, I love that you mentioned a few times, not about us, without us. And I liked that you talked about the importance of recognizing we don't tend to talk about stigma much in classrooms. And I think it's important when you realize what your beliefs are in that staff, in that school culture, in the community, in small communities, what the culture is of that mom, be it a foster mom, a birth mom, an adoptive mom, whatever motherhood or caregiving looks like for you. What are they feeling about having to tell the story again? What do they think you think as a teacher about their child's behavior? What do they think that you think about them? Did they have a bad year last year and missed 2 parent-teacher interviews and got the letter home saying these are really important, you didn't come? Therefore, they have to walk into your office already feeling a little bit sort of out of touch with you. It's if you build that relationship with the caregiver right off the start, that will really help with making conversations around transitions easier. So I love that you brought up stigma. Right about that point, one of our participants, Wanda Beland, who's a network coordinator in Alberta, mentioned that when we talk about prevention, what we're talking about is preventing alcohol use. It's always a fine line to walk when we're talking about preventing FASD. Does that mean we're preventing the condition? Does that mean, what does that mean? So just a reminder to us. Thank you, Wanda, for that comment. Again, back to that emotional memory overrules logic for the student and for the caregiver. I have a daughter who's who's a challenging caregiver and has challenging children. And her emotional memory will come from a meeting that she had with somebody in the school. And then even when she has a different one, I can remember she walked in one day and was kind of being stern with her dysregulated son. And a teacher came out and said, hey, it's okay. Kids have big feelings. And the next time, so she felt like she needed to, you know, look like she was being a little bit more understanding about that. The next day she walked into the school, different teacher came over. He's dysregulated again because coming into the school is a problem. And she came over and said, you know, you need to be a little stricter about the time limit. That's fairly confusing for teachers. And part of building a school culture of acceptance and understanding is also talking yourselves in your school cultures about what we're saying to that mom and that child. What is the welcoming message here? What do you all believe about what people should be doing about that transition behavior? I liked that you talked about it being intentional in both small and large transitions. Again, is your goal just to get the kid to the next place, the student? Or is it a little bit more that you want them to understand the big picture of why it's important to move within a classroom? I liked that intentional. I have one more thing, and then Nicole, you're on. I was in this really cool classroom the other day, and this teacher had one transition within her school classroom. They were little, grade 2, I think. They had one transition point. So she would blow a harmonica, beautiful sound. There were no bells in this school, so that was kind of nice. She set her own curriculum or her own schedule, so that was nice. But she would blow a harmonica. The harmonica meant all children, I think. Maybe it was specific kids. I don't remember. But the harmonica meant whoever she needed to came to one place, whether that's an IKEA dot in your classroom or whether it's a masked off funky duct tape place. The transition was easier because they only had to go from wherever they were to that spot. When they got there, she gave them the key to the next one. It stopped all that crazy thought pattern about where do I need to go? It was this math, is this an assembly, all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to share that with you because I thought that was so cool. And my last, I said that was my last, I was wrong. I have one more. I see teachers doing a really good job of asking kids to leave the situation that's causing them to be dysregulated. And again, I was in a classroom not long ago. They had this great signal going, teacher to student. It meant he needed to leave the room. They had this little closety thing that had a sleeping bag in it, and he got himself in there and got all great and ready to go. But we hadn't talked about how to get him back again. So again, that transition from doing great work to get them recognizing they needed to regulate, and then what did they do when they come in? Do they say, I'm sorry? Do they, like, what does that even look like? He didn't know, so he just stayed, and we had to have a conversation, or we got to have a conversation about that. So beautiful job, Janice. Thanks for starting us off.
Thank
you. Nicole, are you set to go?
And we'll get going. So I do work for POPFASD, which is the Provincial Outreach Program for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders in British Columbia. And we are a provincial outreach team. So we have a team of 6 educators, support staff, and 2 IT. And we're located in School District 57 in Prince George on the unceded ancestral lands of Lake Litani. We do service the whole province. And so we focus on increasing educator capacity to meet the educational needs of students with FASD, and through an FASD informed lens. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. The examples that I'll give you focus there. I mentioned our unceded ancestral lands of Lake Litani, and I quickly want to mention, I know Janice talked about this too, our FASD informed approach and what we mean when we talk about that. So we're really talking about using evidence-based instruction and really targeted interventions for our learners. And we talked about environment. We're going to do this in a supportive environment around the student with consideration for that great diversity from these individuals with FASD. When there are 10 brain domains, there's such a range of how FASD may be expressed in this individual. And there's no one size fits all. We need to have a case-by-case basis. And this holds true for when we're doing transition planning. Each individual will be unique strengths, unique needs, unique tools that we want to introduce into that environment, a unique team and family circumstance. So Janice mentioned something about, preparing the environment and preparing the student. And this is a great time to mention that sometimes this preparation and preloading for our learners and families and ourselves can really give us a sense of calm. I know the plan, I have a structure, I know what to anticipate. There's also a balance there where sometimes you find that there's so much hype and so much excitement and so much talking and planning that it can become overwhelming. And so I'm going to make a lot of suggestions about transition activities that you might engage in. And I will ask you to think, is this a good fit for the learner that we're planning for? I'd like to introduce an acronym today that we can work within to sort of anchor some of the strategies that we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about SAFE. Janice talked about supporting families and having that collaborative relationship, trust, encouraging this space where we can all feel safe. It's imperative. And so within the SAFE framework today, we're going to talk about social and relational supports. Janice, you called this collaboration. We're going to talk about agency and voice for our student and their families. We're going to talk about family supports, and we're also going to talk about environmental supports. At PopFast, we have a tool called the 8 Magic Keys. I have it right here. I'm going to wave it around like you can see it. And this is available on our website. I think I just popped it in the chat, but I'll put it there as well. You can find it if you Google 8 Magic Keys. And the 8 Magic Keys are some guidelines for developing successful intervention for students with FASD. You've already heard about some of them. Janice mentioned consistency. She talked about routine. She talked about supervision and the 9th key, if you were a really fast counter, because there are actually 9, the 9th key is the trusting relationships. And when we're looking to facilitate a transition for our student, we're really looking at building a trusting relationship that's going to go across this change, across class years, across class placements, maybe across schools, across teams. If a student is known by even one adult at school, that students' chances of success increases dramatically. This is from the work of John Hattie and looking at visible learning and effect size. So I'm going to talk about some strategies, and while I'm going on, I'd like you to consider for a moment, while we talk about this, what does it mean to really know a student? So we'll start with social and relational supports. And this is a little cartoon from an infographic woman named Rita Pearson. And I don't know if you've had the chance to watch Rita's TED Talk. I really encourage you to. It's quite engaging and really passionate. She's an educator. She was an educator. And she talks about the value and the importance of this human connection. And she says that there is no significant learning without a significant relationship. And she offers these words to her students. She says, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came, and I will be a better somebody when I leave. And this is a really powerful message to share with our students. It shows us that we're here and that we believe and we're committed. So when we're looking at the adult relationships in a building around a student or around a family, we know, and Janice, you talked about this, how our past experience can really impact how we arrive to work that day, how we show up at that meeting table, and how we greet a student in the hall. And these trusting relationships, they take time, they take energy and attention. They need to be watered a little bit every day for that relationship to grow. We stand greater chance of success in understanding all of those brain domains and being ready to receive responses from students if we have a stronger understanding of FASD. And so seeking out some of that training, if we know that we have new staff coming on board, can we watch some Pro-D together? Can we attend some online training? Sounds like there's a lot. I know there's some available through PopFast, probably through FASD 1. This is really powerful, and it will really shape the culture in our school. Danna, you were talking about school culture. Peer relationships can't be ignored. And I know we've all had the experience where we have a group of kids and we're going to build smaller groups where the kids are going to work together. And we know that some students make really great teammates and we're going to pair them together. And we know that other students actually work a lot better if they're in separate groups. And this works within our day. But when we're looking ahead to a class placement next year, this applies too. And so knowing that these social skills can be challenging and developing relationships can be difficult, making every effort that we can to maintain the closeness of these relationships that our students are developing, it just can't be understated. I know there are restrictions in being able to make strong commitments about class placement, teacher assignment. I know this. And if there's ever a place to ask for some flexibility, I will ask for it here. If I'm able to make that commitment with the caveat that maybe it will change, we don't know, I can immediately start building that bridge and fostering that trusting relationship with next year's teacher. I can invite Mr. Kelch to come into my class and see what's happening and meet the student. I can send my student to Mr. Kelch's class to check things out. And this is part of that proactive planning. And through all of this process, we're going to be asking, how will this next year be the same as this year? And how will it be different? What will be the same and what will be different? So this is a phrase we're going to use a little bit today. I encourage you to sort of look this up online too. There's lots of resources. Sarah Ward is a speech and language pathologist, and she talks a lot about same and different. And so if it's the same, then we can celebrate this because we already have strategies. We already have a schema and a plan for this. If it's different, then that's our opportunity to get curious and ask, do we need a strategy? How will this transition go? What will be different? Agency and voice. You've both said it, nothing about us without us. And there are so many opportunities for adults in the room to give ideas and opinions and input and impressions, and often less so for our learners. So we're thinking about empowering our learners. There's elements to this. We can think about really supporting them in understanding themselves and their learning needs, and also advocating for themselves. So when we're talking about effective tools and strategies, Janice, you mentioned, there's a collective knowledge, and we have reports, or we have individual education plans, or we have last year's teacher's report card. Tools and strategies are really grown-up adult words. We use these words, and it takes time for our learners to understand what these mean too. So I could say, what are the tools and strategies that work for you? And I might not get a really accurate response from the learner. I can ask different questions. I can notice. I can ask, what helps you learn? What did you like about the class this year? What did you really not like about the class this year? If you could take one thing with you when you left, what would you take? Right? What do you find hard about school, or what's your favorite subject? And this starts that opportunity to be curious and reflect, and things that make us feel good at school, things that we like. Sometimes questions are hard. And so making declarative statements like, I notice you get really excited when it's time to go to gym. I notice that you're keen to find books when we go to the library. I notice that you're always spending time with Trina and Vanessa. I wonder if these are your friends. These are ways of increasing student awareness about themselves. That's one part. And then the next part is communicating that and sharing that information. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of some student inventories where we can collate this information and collect this. And this is part of this proactive planning, because once we collect this information, what are we going to do with it? Let's see, is that? Yeah. I have some exciting examples. I'm excited about this. So agency and voice, here's one of them. You can download it. I did put this one in the chat, FASD and me. One of the things that's nice about this inventory is there are some visual supports and prompts. And so we can ask students, what kinds of things would you like? What are your preferences? And having a preference inventory is a pretty powerful tool for ourselves and for the learners. There's also room in this inventory where we can provide more descriptive information. We can ask our learner this. We can also include family and teachers in supporting this. And I'll talk in just a sec about what that structured interview might look like. This is one example. There's another example as well here, FASDsuccess.com. This one, similar, fewer visual supports and sort of fewer checklists. And there is this understanding me component where we can describe ourselves, but there are also some specific areas that address those brain domains that Janice and Danna were talking about, and give us space to include what those accommodations might be, what are my memory supports, how's my attention. I'd really encourage you, if you're going to use a tool like this, to treat it as sort of a living document that can grow and change. Once we put this information in here, we might notice things evolve. And so I might have a student who at the beginning of the year says, no to math, I don't like math, I'm no good at math, that's not my strength. And then through the year, as we implement some strategies and tools, and we have really targeted interventions, we can see our students' math skills grow. And I might say, I notice that over the year, you've really liked doing these math activities. And I see that you've done all of these steps. And here's some tools I see you using. I wonder how you're feeling about math right now. And so take a line, draw it across the bottom of there, put on a new date and says, I'm starting to like math. It can evolve and grow with us. If I'm doing this as the outgoing team member, I'm going to ask questions like, what do you want your new team to know about you? What do you think is important for them to hear and see? And if I'm doing this as the incoming team member, I'm going to say something like, we have so much to learn about each other. I have some questions, let's learn together. So this is another opportunity for us to be curious together and engage our learner. We do know that the way that our student is going to be able to participate in these activities is going to depend on their age and also their maturity level. And understanding that dysmaturity plays a role in how our students with FASD are able to participate in this. And Janice talked too about that masking. And sometimes we might have a student who's 12 or 14 or 18 years old, and they present like their cognitive skills are also at that age, but we might find that there's pretty impaired language skills or attention skills or cognition skills. And so really having an understanding of how is that, is the student's response really representative of their knowledge and their skills? We're going to talk quickly about that transition to high school. And this is a time where there's a huge difference, right? Something that's the same as you will have math. Something that's different is that it's going to happen in a room down the hall. And so you're going to have to get out of your English class. You're going to have to walk down the hall to your locker, change your materials, and then go to your math class. And you've only got 5 minutes to do it. And it's a crazy busy hallway. Go. Right? There's so many opportunities for breakdown here. So if we can preload and anticipate where we need to go, let's print off a map of the school. Let's mark where the rooms are, and let's trace a map so that we can see where we're going. Something that's the same in high school as in elementary school is you get a lunch break, you get to eat lunch. Something that's different is you can eat wherever you want, which could be like a mind-blowing idea and could be super overwhelming in a huge school. So after we've mapped where our classes are, maybe we could identify some zones where we're going to take our lunch to sit and eat. Right? These are some preloading activities where we can give our students a plan. When we do this, we increase their agency by increasing their opportunity to make informed choices. This is a high school example. This could be a younger elementary school example. So I talked about sending my student over to Mr. Kelsch's class, and I can go over and look to see like, oh yeah, he's got a visual schedule and he's using transition warnings, and I see dimmed lighting, and these are great things, and I feel excited about that. But it's actually about the learner. And so if you know me, you'll know I love a good clipboard. And so here's my little clipboard. It says same and different. And so if I give this to my learner and I send them over to Mr. Kelsch's class, I'd like you to look and see, find me 3 things that are the same and 3 things that are different. This is an incredible opportunity to see what students are noticing and what's paying attention to them. And so he comes back and he tells me, whoa, so different there. They have desks and we have tables. Yeah, this is, and as adults, we might not think this is a big deal, but this is something my learner paid attention to. You know, he sits on a wiggle stool. Is this wiggle stool going to fit at your new desk? Great. No, let's problem solve that, right? Mr. Kelsch didn't have a schedule on his board. I couldn't find it anywhere. We have a schedule on our room. Is that important to you? How do you use it? Is that something we could talk to Mr. Kelsch about? You know, these are opportunities to say, yeah, I found some things that are same, and isn't that great? We have strategies for that. Let's problem solve the things that are different or that we don't yet have strategies for. I'm aware of the time. I know it's 11. I have been told I have another 15 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. I understand if some of you need to go and have places to be, but I'll keep giving some examples here. Family supports. Again, Janice, you mentioned this and you called this collaboration. This is such a powerful, it's just amazing. I love to talk about this. And so it's this reminder that anytime we're opening the doors to our school or to our classroom, this is an invitation to reinforce and contribute to and bolster the relationship between the whole school community and families. And I will give some examples. Some you will know, some you'll maybe be surprised at. Open houses, clearly, where we let families in and say, come and see our school. Sports day events where families can volunteer or be spectators. Welcome to school barbecues, kindergarten ice cream events, grade 8 barbecues, pancake breakfasts, even assemblies and concerts that are at the school. Every time we get to reinforce that the family is part of our school community. This is not a student-specific intervention. I'm not hosting a grade 8 barbecue for 2 kids. I'm holding it for 200 kids and everybody's welcome. And It lays the foundation so that later, if I do need to have a more difficult conversation, or I am asking a family to come in for an individual education plan meeting or a learning plan meeting or a safety plan review, we already have this shared experience. So I, as an educator, I might have certain families that I'm looking out for and I want to connect with. But really my job is to be there and to be accessible and to show that I'm part of this school community as well. Past experiences and future hopes, absolutely. And Janice, you said we don't know what happened before. And so really having compassion for families as they make this transition. If we're moving schools, so from preschool to kindergarten, or my camera just fell off there. I was waving my arms around too much. Kindergarten, preschool to kindergarten, or kindergarten to grade 8, or from middle school to high school, not only is the student changing grades and classrooms and schools, but we're also changing our whole support team. So in British Columbia, we have a preschool service provider agency. They also have school age. There's no carryover. So what we have to understand is that families who have spent up to 5 years building this trusting relationship around their child with a care team has to leave that. And now we're saying, come on into school, we're your new team. This is going to take time. So agency and voice continuity, what I mean by these is that anytime we can have some carryover, let's do it. So in school, the classroom teacher might change, but can we have somebody else in that school team who is going to be our, continue to be part of that team? Maybe it's the principal, resource teacher, maybe it is the counselor or the support worker. Any chance we can continue that relationship, that will be positive. And really asking the family, what are your hopes? What are your concerns? I love being at a transition meeting where the family speaks first. They are really the experts on their family. And so when we start a meeting, I'll bring this up right now. When we start a meeting, having this inclusive welcome where we know we all have a place at the table. This transition meeting that I was at last week, we didn't do this and it didn't feel good, where we went around the table and we said, hi, I'm Nicole and I'm a speech pathologist for the district. And that was my introduction. And what I wish I would have said was, hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a speech pathologist for the district. And the reason I'm here is so that I can listen to your preschool team and to you and hear about the strategies that are working for your child. And then I'm going to help implement those in the classroom room. And that breaks down a lot of barriers and creates it sort of an open culture of sharing at the table. So ensuring that parents have that opportunity to share their concerns. We don't have time to talk a lot about these signature practices, but there is a website and I'd encourage you to have a look. In our office, we keep coming back to this and talking about this more. How are we really ensuring that meetings and some of these more formal events still have space for humanity in them? Okay, our timing is okay. We're going to talk about environmental supports. I'm not looking at the chat, but I'll have a peek afterwards just in case there's any questions. Let's just make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So Janice talked about preparing the environment around the student, right? Welcoming our student into a prepared space, an FASD-informed classroom. The reason we implement these environmental supports around our student is to maximize their success by reducing the extraneous cognitive load. And so, and another way to say this is we're freeing up brain space to do the job. If all of their brain space and attentional capacity and energy is used up managing the bright lights and the noise down the hall and the uncomfortable seat and the strange smell in the classroom and the wiggle in their body and the noise of the thing and the wondering about what's coming next, doesn't leave a lot of space left to actually do the job, to do the math job, to play the board game, to stay regulated while we're doing the circle sharing thing. So when I have a supportive FASD-informed classroom, I've considered so much of those elements so my student can come in and be ready to engage as much as possible, right? And there's always some tweaks. One of the 8 magic keys is consistency. And Janice, you talked about consistency. I got really excited and started making some notes. Another word for consistency is predictability. When I do the same thing, when I'm consistent all the time, it makes me really predictable. And we like predictability, right? I know what to expect. I don't have to spend a lot of time worrying and panicking and wondering. And we all do this. So here's an example. Before this session, Janice and I connected online for half an hour to talk about and introduce ourselves and sort of share our ideas for this. Danna and I talked, and so we were able to share that. And after both of those meetings, we went, okay, I feel better now. I know what to anticipate. I know what I can predict for this session. And so that freed up a lot of brain space for me. So we're going to talk about being consistent, and I'd like you to consider, as I give these examples, we talked about same but different, right? Here's something that's the same. I have a strategy for this. How can I take it from the now, from this classroom, from this school, from this setting, and move it into the next one? Where am I going next? So these are examples that I've found in classrooms, and I look for something that makes a connection, I guess is what I'll ask for you. Okay, first, I should have shown the slide a minute ago. These are some environmental scans, and I will make these available. You can't read it, but what we're talking about is exactly that, paying attention to the physical environment that we're asking our students to come into, and be prepared to notice things that really fit an FASD informed lens, and some things that we can say, I wonder if I could make a change here. So this is available. It's not a checklist, it's not evaluative, but it is a chance to check in and say, how is my environment ready to receive my learner? This is a grown-up, an adult educator version of an environmental scan that my student is doing. And I didn't say this before, but we're talking about preloading. And so if I do know where my student's going to go next year and I can send them in ahead of time, that's great. If I don't, all is not lost. And I might shift this clipboard activity to something different where it's a bit more of a scavenger hunt. So for once the students are in my classroom or in their learning environment, I'm going to have them look for things and notice things and pay attention to things. So on my search list, I might have things like schedule, desk, literacy center, bathroom, coat hook, lunch book rack, like all of these things that are going to be part of routines that I'm going to teach. I want to draw my students' attention to those. So I can use that environmental scan in a kid-friendly version in the form of a scavenger hunt. I couldn't present as an SLP and not show you some examples of visual schedules. Visual schedules are sometimes pictures, sometimes words. These are examples of visual supports. Visual means I can see it. Doesn't mean it's a picture, but it means I can see it. And so here are 3 examples of some scheduling tools that are in classrooms that I have seen around. They don't have to be fancy. They don't have to cost money. The one on the left, the yellow one, we're working in a first then. So two step schedule. It is laminated. It doesn't need to be laminated. So anytime I can be predictable, I can be really concrete, which is another magic key. This increases my students' ability to pay attention to this information, to anticipate it, to know what's coming, and spend a little bit less time feeling anxious and worried and wondering what's coming next. Here's another example of a visual support. If you've ever watched new kindergarten students get dressed, and you'll see a kid put on his mittens first and then stand here and then be pretty stuck because it's hard to get dressed the rest of the way once your mittens are on, we can have a visual support for this. So a great rule of thumb is if you repeat it more than once, make a visual support, put it out in the hall. And we print this, we have it in French and in English, and I get pretty excited when I go to schools and I see it spread around. It's something that all the adults can cue to. So this is called a within activity schedule that guides the steps within a single activity of getting dressed. Sorry, well, I'll say this here too. Another note is that I might make this with a student in mind. I might go online looking for a tool because I know I have the student coming to my classroom, and we've talked about this at the transition meeting, knowing they're going to need some visual supports for the day. So I might search it out with a student in mind. And I wonder, when I make it available to everybody in the class, how many students will reference it? How many students will notice it? How many students will benefit from it? So I really encourage you to post them widely, use them freely, and have them in many environments. And Janice, you talked about that too, consistency across environments. In a kindergarten classroom where I was yesterday, we talked about learning the routine when we come into the classroom. about which centers are open and which ones are not open, and how it would be easy to kind of be running around trying to corral students who really want to play with all of the centers. But if I can have a visual support that clearly shows us which ones are open and which ones are closed for all students, now I no longer need to police everybody. I can give verbal reminders. Oh, this one is open. Water table's closed. Shoot. And Magnetiles is open. So print off 200 of them. Don't laminate them. Don't waste your time laminating them, because you can just print off more and stick them all over the place, and we'll all know what's open and closed. We've all had the experience too of being a different adult who walks into the room and picks up the one thing that's supposed to be closed today. And now we've just started a firestorm. Well, I've had that experience myself anyway. Here are some visual supports, right? I could say, hands off, stay in your own space, speak to self, sit around the edges, which is a lot of language. And we know that this brain domain can be affected. Or I can say, sit on a spot, sit on a spot, sit on a spot. Right? Just as a note, these spots were on the carpet in a classroom that I was in last week, and it's May. There is no need to feel any pressure to fade your visual supports. They can stay. The stop sign is always there, no matter how many times you go to that corner. We don't take that visual support away. And these visual supports don't need to leave either. So if we know that they're working for our learners, we keep them, and they can transition next year too. I'll say to that classroom teacher, she does best with a sit spot. If you can give her a sit spot, she's super successful at carpet. Why wouldn't I use this? So an environmental support also, we might not think of it this way, but is any time that we're going to support our students in managing their materials and their belongings. So organization and memory can be impaired. Danna was talking about that. So when I go to high school, we've already talked about this busy transition and moving between spaces. Materials management is huge. We can practice doing this too in intermediate grades before we go. I can have a bunch of different binders, and I'll give you that example in a minute. But what if I had one binder with dividers for all of my subjects? And a transition support is that teacher in all of those 4 classes for our student is going to know they have one binder. And my cue is going to be, this goes in the math divider. This goes in the science section. But if I have one binder, then I don't have to go to my locker between every class. And I always have the right binder when I get there. I always have the right tool. I might even get one of these like pencil cases that snaps in my binder. So I always have my highlighter and I always have my pencil. This is really priming me to show up and be successful, right? This is important. If their first 10 minutes of class is spent going back to locker and back again, that's a lot of instructional time we're losing. I might even have the map of our mapped class route in the front of this binder. These are many options. A different option would be is if you don't want to have one binder with all your subjects, is you can have a binder or a tool for each, a place to put your information for each subject. And we could color code these. So I can have a binder for math, and I'm going to print off my block schedule. I'm going to highlight it and mark the colors in there, and I'm going to stick it inside my locker so that when I get there and I'm in a hurry, I can quickly look to see math, yellow, 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 here I go. Right? This is an example of supporting our students of being independent, of having agency in managing their belongings. And this is crucial. This is so important. What are you going to do when you get to class? How many of you know of students who do all the work but never turn it in, right? And so having a system, what's our turn in plan when you're done the work? Here's a turn in bin. Nothing's laminated. It's just stuck on there. It was probably a bin that was found in the old book room. So it costs no money to make. And it's consistent. I'm always asking students to put this in at the same spot. And it's amazing if you establish this routine and then students, the turn-in bin gets moved or they don't go to a classroom without a turn-in system, they will ask, say, well, what do I do with this now? So having a plan for this, we can anticipate. This is a way that we can prepare our environment to support our students with difficulty with organization. Here's another example where we label the bins, right? Visual supports are consistent and it helps us know where things go. I might put closed signs on these ones where there's no label just to reinforce that we're not playing with those building blocks today.
Nicole?
Yes.
You are doing such a good job, but my
Oh, I
sleep.
told you to cut me off when it was time.
I don't want to cut you off. I just want you to pick your next favorites.
Okay, this is my next favorite. That's a bit of a cheat because it's my last one. But I'll be quick. Thank you for the timing warning. Preloading and social stories. We've talked about this. Maybe you have two for kindergarten and early transitions. What's it going to look like? And we script this for our students when I go to kindergarten. We realized that this needed to happen in high school too. And so we wrote some social stories for high school transitions. We wrote it with a student in mind, and we realized that all students could benefit from it. So we went around to all of the high schools and we wrote this social story, and we tried to pay attention to the things that are the same and the things that are different. I have it as a PowerPoint slide with the script, and all you need to do is take pictures of your own high school and stick them in there. So this is how we're going to preload our students for what to expect when they get to high school. You can write your own script, but if you're interested, I'll give you my email address and you're welcome to email me. I'm happy to share this out any chance we can. And so this is my last one. When we are consistent, we repeat the same tools. We do this, we establish strong routines, we're highly predictable, and this creates this really stable learning environment for our learners and our families where we can feel safe and anticipate what's going to happen when we get to school that day. So thank you.
You can tell that this idea of knowing the student is coming loud and clear from both Janice and Nicole and I, and that you cannot assume a transition plan until you know the student well and what the transition plan they need to have. I am a residential support home. We are a residential support home. And if you told him that something was going to happen 2 weeks in advance, you would have a meltdown on your hand for that 2 weeks. So I love this. I notice and I wonder, and seeing about always being recognizing the uniqueness in every single student. While you were both talking, I think about so many of the schools that I'm in now where we're not having the conversation about what the next teacher or the next family school liaison worker wants to know. And as you were both talking, I was thinking, we kind of assume that teachers will not assume. We need to recognize, I think, that conversations about what a teacher is worried about, what a teacher is excited about, is kind of cool too. So if you're an administrator or a learning support coordinator, I'm going to encourage you also to take these same principles that we just heard from Janice and Nicole about working with the student, and think too about making a transition plan for the teacher. That might be a neat conversation to have. They've been working, they're a grade 6 teacher, they've seen this student from grade 1 to 5. What are they thinking that they'd like to see change or add or stay the same, whatever that looks like?
That's such a great idea, because it also reinforces building that trusting relationship within your school and between teachers and administrators. And that really encourages us, to want to learn more and be involved.
Definitely. I was in a high school not long ago that's getting ready, and they have, and I was looking it up as you were talking, and I can't remember, there's a name for this. And in their school, they identify kids that have a little bit more difficulty making a safe and secure relationship. And they have a schedule of how they're going to have 3 conversations a day. I think that might even be what it's called. So Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones, and Mrs. whoever, make sure that on day 1 you are talking to Johnny, and that way he has had a conversation with 3 adults. And if that could be an I wonder and I notice conversation, I love that idea. It's a really cool idea. So some schools have it just kind of as a part of their practice. Others are far more formal about it, and it's a really neat thing. I think that's great.
I love that example. I'm interrupting you again, but one of the things I forgot to mention was about having that secure relationship or that championing adult. You need more than one, right? We need to have that secure relationship with at least 2 in our building, because somebody's going to be sick someday.
That's
and
right.
We can't say you need to hold your concerns and dysregulation for tomorrow. That's not going to work, right? So we need to have at least 2 champions in our building. So your example of 3 is amazing.
That's awesome. And never forget the importance of the caretaker, the janitor, the secretary, the bus driver, and all those things that can be an important part when we talk collaboration. We tend to think school team. Let's think also about the other people that have an effect on that student. That is it. I'm like a little emotional today about meeting the two of you. Thank you so much for your amazing passion, amazing ideas. Um, find these ladies and find me, and you'll be able to have some great ideas. And I think I thank you. And I can see them. I can just say thank you. I think it's been an amazing hour and a half, and we did well by sticking kind of sort of to our time.
Thank you so
So
much for having us.
Been great.
awesome. Goodbye, all you participants. Have a great day. Take a look out your window and remember to stay compassionate. It's a great place to be. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.